Hello, welcome to 21 This Week. I'm Susan Heltemes, filling in for Casey Aiken, who's away. This week, Wayne Curry has died. New Park and Planning Chair to be chosen, and more post-election pondering. Joining us today to discuss this and more is a panel of keen observers to share their insight. Democratic strategist Rich Parsons, transportation activist Robin Uncapher, Mark Uncapher, Mr. Uncapher of Mrs. Uncapher, of course, past chair of the Montgomery County Republican Party, and Henry Hailstock, past president of the Montgomery County branch NAACP. Please come back, right back after this short message. This week, the first African-American executive of Prince George's County was laid to rest after losing a battle with lung cancer at the age of 63. He was known as an astute political strategist, a shrewd deal maker, an outspoken proponent of non-smoking at the end of his life, and throughout as an unapologetic cheerleader and advocate for gorgeous Prince George's County, never to be known again as PG County. Rich, Curry's business acumen brought him personal wealth, but more importantly, he began the transformation of Prince George's County into a more vibrant community to include Bowie Town Center, National Harbor, and FedEx Field. You've been engaged in the business community for a long time. What's going to be his legacy?
Well, his legacy will be lasting and puts him right at the top pantheon of great leaders in the state history, not just Prince George's County. You know, Wayne Curry is one of those rare individuals, and people use the word larger than life to describe him. He really had a great personality, was just an absolutely winning smile, and you know, he formed friendships the moment you met him. But his accomplishments as a public official will stand the test of time. He was that rare commodity that we don't see enough of these days, the true leader. He had the vision to really chart a bold course, and then he had the political skill set and the drive and determination to see things through and make big change happen. He did that in Prince George's County. He and former County Executive Doug Duncan teamed up here on a lot of state issues. A big part of the political shift in this state from the bullies in Baltimore who used to beat up our delegation and take their lunch money every day, and that shift of power from the Baltimore power centers to a more even split between the Washington suburbs and Baltimore. Wayne Curry is responsible for a lot of that too, and he deserves great credit. He will be sorely missed.
At such a young age, too.
Yeah.
Now, Henry, Executive Curry was remembered as a tell-it-like-he-is with rather salty language, as a role model and mentor, and this was at the funeral, that was attended by 2,500 people, including leaders across the state. Now, Montgomery County Executive Ike Leggett described him today as a great leader with a bold vision for his county, and who set the standard for future minority leaders heading suburban jurisdictions throughout this country. How is Wayne Curry going to be remembered in Prince George's and the state, especially in the African American community?
Well, let me just say this. Personally, I interacted with Wayne when I was at Giant Food. And I have to give this a funny story before I give my full interpretation, is that the Safeway manager or director at that time and I were going to meet and sit down and talk about diversity and interacting in some programs that we can do together. We walked into this restaurant that Wayne always goes to as well. You should have seen Wayne's eyes. It's bulged up when he looked at it, so we looked at him and said, yes, this is a coalition here. And then sat down. And he came over and said, you know, that doesn't look good. John and Safeway doing together. I said, it doesn't look good with you and, you know, some of the county representatives over there either. And he laughed. He said, I guess you're right, and walked off. He's that kind of person. He's personable, but you described him correctly when you said a leader, because he built coalitions, and that's how he's going to be remembered. Building those coalitions in all of the communities. He had to, when he first became county exec, he had to build those coalitions because it was a all-white county, and he saw the change that needed to come and happen. You had a community that really was preaching, oh, give us low housing everywhere. He said, no, that's not the way this county should grow. So he worked and built executive areas and built homes for the all of the top, middle, and lower income people.
Susan, if I could just add, he struck me as what I would call a true progressive. He understood that in order to get progressive, movement in our society and for government to play a role in that, you got to pay attention to the tax base and growing the economy.
Yes.
He fully got that. He was a great champion on the inter-county connector, lots of transportation priorities for Metro, for Purple Line, all the things that help build the job base of Prince George's County and the region. And he was, he built those coalitions, as Henry said, but he didn't offend people. He was charming and smart and always focused. I'm going to miss him tremendously. He was a great guy.
One thing you need to remember, if you did not work with him or you weren't able to yield, he had nothing to do with it.
He did not suffer fools.
And
he did not.
He didn't really embarrass you. He just would not come back.
It was interesting. I had the honor of being able to watch the funeral yesterday, and there was a lot of humor, and it was obvious that he had a great sense of humor.
Oh, yes. Oh.
And his brother, when he was speaking, pretended that St. Peter called him and said, yeah, he's like that, if things aren't going his way, he tends to change things. Oh, no, but don't send him down there. He'll be okay. And Senator Mikulski had everybody laughing because she essentially said what you said. You got things. It was an encounter when you meant it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And if he had been able to be there more than 8 years, who knows what could have happened. But we have to move on.
Very progressive.
And yes, he was a great guy. So, and he will be missed. So what do Meredith Wellington, Norman Dreyfus, Mike Knapp, Casey Anderson, and Rose Krasnow have in common? Now, if you guess that they all want to be the chair of the Montgomery County Park and Planning Commission and were all interviewed by the County Council this week, well, you'd be correct. Now, Robin, what does it mean to be the chair of the Park and Planning Commission?
It means to have a tremendous amount of influence over what gets built here, what doesn't get built here, and what the county looks like over the course of 10 or 20 years. It is a difficult job, it's highly political, and if you've ever been in a zoning battle with anybody, you know that it's extremely emotional.
So, Henry and Rich, what do we know about these 5 characters?
Well, I know that the one gentleman that we both know together, I feel is the most qualified because of his real estate background,
Who's that?
his progressive intellect, and what he has been doing in the community as well.
And who's that?
That's the white-haired guy.
Casey Anderson? He has a nice head of hair.
Yes,
I
indeed.
can say he does have very nice hair, but so do some of the other candidates, especially compared to yours truly.
That's why I was
But,
looking at him.
yeah, exactly. But no, Casey, I think, is one of the strongest contenders. I didn't see all the interviews on the county cable station, but I saw most of his anyway, and a couple of the others. I thought he did real well. I think he has, as Henry indicated, that combination of coming from the civic community with a strong background in the real estate issues that the planning board deals with. And Robin's absolutely right. This is a terribly important position for the county. And I think there's one other factor I'm hoping the county council is going to look at. The planning board is meant to have independence from the council. They're appointed and they're meant to make decisions on the merits for the
But
good of
let's
the
get
community.
back to the
and insulate them a bit
characters.
from the politics.
But
It's
what about
gotten
the
too
others?
political lately.
Well,
and
what
I'm
about
hoping
the
you'll
other
pick someone who'll
people?
bring it back to its
But
real
let's
role.
get back to the
Well,
to the candidates.
let me tell you
first.
about the other candidates. NAACP had an issue with the Farm Road a few months ago with the African American owners of the property there. And looking at the interaction with everyone, there was only 2 people that I thought really looked at the community and tried to really work with them. The others looked,
And who
for
are
lack of
those
a better
2?
word, dumbfounded. Is the outgoing chair, I forget her name. What's
Francois Carrier.
Yes, and our friend, the hair.
Casey Anderson. But what about Norm Dreyfus is a builder, Rose Krasnow was the mayor of Rockville, and Marie Wellington is a current chairperson on the committee.
Right, and the County Chamber of Commerce interviewed all the candidates, and I was there for some of those interviews as well. And you've got a good group, fortunately for the county to choose between. And Norman Dreyfus sits on the board currently and is getting very good reviews for the work he's doing. The question for the council might be, hey, why would we take him off where he's doing a good job?
Okay, now wait a minute. Now, Mark, this is where you come in. Very few people have a clue as to what they do. But what kind of person should they pick?
Well, one of the challenges of the job is we in Montgomery County have a kind of ambivalence about being a suburban county, and there are those who would like to see the county be more densely populated and have more concentration for transportation, and frankly, those who would like it a more traditional suburban. And there's this push and pull that is an undercurrent to so many of these issues. Now, clearly, they have a plan that they need to take that is sort of provides the foundation for that. But that tension is something that, on a day-to-day basis, whoever is chairman needs to be able to bridge those differences.
And there also is the traditional business versus civic. You know, like,
Yeah, I agree.
you know, the civic, not in my neighborhood, but, you know, well, we need a
Right.
tax base to pay the bills.
Right, and I think Mark referred to this, but there's really an important role for the planning board, and especially the chairperson of the planning board, to fight for the master plans that really guide those developments and are meant to mediate those tensions between, is this area going to be rural, this area around a metro station, we're going to allow more density, more urbanization, and that this plan is really what mediates all those disputes and all those tensions. And your planning board chair really needs to champion that plan so that it doesn't get chopped up piecemeal by the forces of NIMBYism or economic opportunism, and so that everything continues to mesh and work the way it's supposed to.
And you know what? One thing that hasn't been mentioned, that person is also the head of the Parks Department. And we have recreation as a department within the county government. But that person does lead the Parks Department, and that's a big deal too. So we are going to end it there. The announcement will be made early this next week, I hear. So stay tuned for more 21. Primary election results were certified, and the only undecided race was called in Montgomery County when Tom Hucker was declared the victor in the Democratic primary in County Council District 5 race. Now, Rich, this is the most Democratic of Democratic councils districts in the whole county. What are we going to get from Tom Hucker?
Well, it's interesting. I met with him several months before the election, and we had a great conversation about that. And I think he's very clear. First of all, one thing you get from Tom Hucker, he's a very smart guy. And I think from the conversation, I took away that he fully understands this is a different job than the job he's been doing in Annapolis. And I think he's going to come in, based on his representations to me, I think he's going to come in very open-minded, trying to really learn about the set of issues the county council deals with. It's a lot of transportation and land use issues, primarily those two, and that's really not what our state delegation deals with in Annapolis. So I think he's going to come in, I'm encouraged, I think he's going to come in looking to learn about these issues. I think he does know what he doesn't know, and I think he knows what he knows, and I'm optimistic that he'll do a good job. Yeah. You know, there's some concern that he's such a liberal legislator, but I think that's a very liberal district.
This is the only time I'm going to disagree with Richard. He knows a lot about this area. You forget that he started and ran Progressive Maryland.
Oh, it was Progressive Montgomery first, and
that's
then
right.
Progressive Maryland.
Yes, well,
yeah.
Okay. I only know it Progressive Maryland because he had worked with the NAACP with a number of issues, and he brought a number of leaders together to discuss these issues and to go as a coalition to the county council and to the State Department on those things as well. So he knows, particularly in transportation.
Okay, he really and I think you guys don't even have anybody over there. Do the Republicans even have a challenger to Tom?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Well, it doesn't matter. In 5, he's in. He's going to be my council person in a few months. In Anne Arundel County, a Republican named Anthony Peruka won the primary race in the District 2 County Council race by 38 votes. Now, this race has attracted a national attention in that Peruka ran as the Constitution Party's candidate for president in 2004. He focuses on God, family, and the Republic with special emphasis on the Bible. Furthermore, he's an active member of the Southern secessionist group, the League of the South. Now, Mark, what do you know about Peruka, and could a Democrat maybe win this right-leaning district?
Well, he's a relatively new Republican. He was a constitutional party until February, and he was, from what I understand, planning on running for Attorney General, and then when Jeff Pritzker got in the race, decided he didn't really have a good chance. This is a district where the Republican incumbent was extremely unpopular because he had voted for the rain tax. He voted with Democrats on the Anne Arundel County legislature. He got a quarter of the vote. The vote against him was basically split. The incumbent came in third. And I think this is a case where kind of the stealth candidate got through the process and is running. So the question, your question was, could a Democrat win? Maybe a Democrat who was against the rain tax might win in that district.
But I mean, seriously.
I am serious.
No. Well, okay. But what I want to know is, with a pass like that, I mean, are people going to vote for someone who's in favor of secession?
Look, all kinds of crazy, ridiculous things happen in elections when you have horribly, embarrassingly, freakishly low turnout. And we have got, and I'll talk about this later in my parting shots, but we've got to talk about the electoral system in Maryland, which is broken. And specifically, you know, when you get this low turnout in the primary, really anything can happen. And you can get fringe candidates that really don't merit much response at all.
And you know what's interesting? Casey keeps saying when he's here that, you know, the Tea Party seems to have passed Maryland by, but instead
Maybe not.
Well, but he's not Tea Party.
No,
I mean, he's
beyond them.
Yeah,
and who knows what the Birchers are doing these days? I mean, they're
No, I just
with the Soviet Union gone, they have lots of extra time on their hands.
No, it will be. This is a race that is going to be interesting to see if the Democrats are able. I mean, if there is a race that probably or could easily go.
All we have to do is put up his background
Right.
to all the voters and educate them. You will get a turnout, particularly the black vote
Right.
against him.
against him.
And put forward a viable candidate, and I think you'll see the voters throw this
Almost
guy
any
out.
candidate.
Yeah, almost any candidate. But they have to have a viable alternative. But I think if the Democrats produce a viable candidate, this is a great chance.
Well,
for
and it's
Yeah, no
interesting
question.
because seldom does a county council race in Maryland merit national television.
Right.
But we're almost done. Now, Blair Lee, a past host of 21 This Week, wrote in his Gazette newspaper column last week that a theme in the primary election was race, specifically black voting power. He continued to say that the winners must make the rules, so don't be surprised if some big changes lie ahead just over the horizon. Henry, what was Blair talking about there?
Basically, we have, if you look at the results, we had a big turnout. You had a lot of people who have come forward to take over, and really it's going to be different in Annapolis. So much so because you have a lot of people that are going to be progressively asking for some changes, and not the run of the mill. Okay, I especially like what's going on in the Senate. Really, it's going to be some changes. That's what I felt that he was talking about, and I like the way he brought out the fact that the African American vote is stepping up, which it is, and I'm very surprised at the number. I didn't realize the percentages that were out there were still low, but
Very
the percentages for African Americans coming in the primary was up, and I'm impressed with that. So that's what I got from.
Do you think Anthony Brown made a difference there?
I think that he was part of that, yes. But I also have to think, let's take Montgomery County. You had 37 African American candidates, okay? And
How many won?
3.
It's a start. It's a first step.
But that's telling me that the community, the African American community, is taking more of an interest in our well-being.
Yeah,
And,
but we also have to factor in the fact that every incumbent won again in Montgomery County. It is very hard to defeat an incumbent once they're there. And maybe that's going to change. But okay, Rich has already
forget
told.
Will Smith. He's not an incumbent.
Yes, he won, yeah. Now, Rich, you've already told me I'm crazy, but on what I'm going to say. But I interpreted his column, I'll admit that, as the ruminations of an angry white man who knows that he and his cohorts are losing control. Minorities, yes, are taking over. And I think that's good, but what do you think?
I think you totally misread the article, or maybe I read a different article by Blair Lee. I don't know.
Maybe,
I thought he was.
maybe I'd been tippling on the bottle. One never
I'm
knows.
kind of with Henry. I think there's a tension within the Democratic establishment in the state, which historically was largely white and liberal, and almost had this attitude of paternalism, like they had to take care of all these minority communities. Well, now, as Henry said, minority candidates, the minority community's voting power is speaking for itself, and that's going to threaten some certain people in the power structure, but not Blair Lee. It's going to threaten some people who are used to having incumbency handed to them just because they're part of the Democratic Party establishment by young, up-and-coming minority candidates who are probably more in touch with their districts because those districts are changing, and that's what's driving this. There's nothing bad about it.
When I met that also, it's like, how much longer will Mike Bush and Mike Miller be in control? That will be interesting to see in the next few years. If that's
in Mike Miller's case, as long as he wants to be, he will be in control, is my candid guess. But Mike Miller and Mike Bush, the leadership in the State House, I think have done a pretty good job of managing things, and I think it's going to be real interesting to see how the governor's race plays out. I think Anthony Brown's going to bring a whole skill set that's going to be very interesting. He's from the moderate wing of the Democratic Party. He has done a fantastic job, I think, in the legislature as a delegate from Prince George's County for many years before becoming lieutenant governor. And I think he's going to be a real breath of fresh air, bringing kind of that new generational leadership to the Democratic Party.
Well, one of the things I have to say about the House leaders is that they go along with what the majority that they're saying, and they're
that's
willing,
how they stay in power.
That's exactly right.
Yes, and they work toward that. My contention is that with some of these young, new people coming in, they're going to make a difference because they're going to start talking and speaking up.
And we also have and I don't want to make an assumption of who's going to be the next governor.
Good.
But if it were Anthony Brown and Ken Ullman, they're both young people also.
Right.
And they're from this area. And I think that we've talked about voter turnout, and I know we're going to be talking about that more in the future, but I would think that Anthony Brown will bring out a large black vote in November because they're going to be making history in a state that...
No, he will bring out a large minority vote.
Yes.
Because you have the Latinos, you have the Asians, and you have the African Americans that are
to a point, but African Americans will be making history because it will be the first African American.
Susan, Blair Lees have been losing primaries in this state for over a century.
I
think
know.
it was his grandfather or his great-grandfather that was defeated for renomination to the U.S. Senate 100 years ago.
On that note, we're going to be back with parting shots in a minute. And now with parting shots, Rich.
Thank you, Susan. We've talked about it a bit today already, but Maryland's primary system is so badly broken. When you get 16% turnout in a primary, that's the only election really that matters in some of the one-party areas of the state. When you get 20%, overall turnout, these are not numbers that we should be picking the people running our state and our county based upon. It's time Maryland got on the reform bandwagon that California's got on. Let's go to open primaries. Let's go to a winner-take-all primary system, or a top two primary system like they've done, and let's get the voice of the public back engaged in this primary process. We're electing people based on the fringe, not the voters, and it's got to change.
Robin, you're up.
Well, we discovered this week that smallpox was sitting around NIH. And it's interesting because ever since 9/11, NIH has looked more and more like a fortress, and now we discover that the government is doing such a lousy job of actually policing itself that we have smallpox vials sitting there since the 1950s. So I really think the community should be asking NIH and other government facilities, what is there, and could you please check and not keep it around here?
Mark.
Coming back to what Rich said in talking about the election, I'd like to talk a little bit about voter suppression. It turns out that the issue of having early voting ends up across the country declining to voter turnout. Research has been done, Political Science Quarterly, certainly was reflected in the Maryland election. It turns out early voting diffuses the turnout effort and ends up with something like 2 to 3% less voters turnout.
So Henry, your last.
Yes, last but not least.
Of course.
I would like to say good luck to all of the representatives who are going down to the NAACP conference in Las Vegas. They're going to do more discussion on civil rights than gambling. So please be safe, and we'll see what you come up with later on.
And I want to thank our panel for being here tonight. Thank you for joining us this week. We look forward to seeing you again next week. for Montgomery County's hardest-hitting political talk show. And until then, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, or you can watch us on YouTube. And for 21 This Week, I'm Susan Heltemes. Bye for now.
We have.